Modern Love, the podcast, is supported by
From the New York Times and WBUR Boston, this is Modern Love. Stories of love, loss, and redemption. I'm your host, Meghna Chakrabarty. When it comes to gestures of love, it's the thought that counts, right? But sometimes a well-meant gift is misinterpreted and a good deed gets punished, as it did for Ellen Urbani. Diane Raphael, who plays Brianna Hansen in the Netflix series Grace and Frankie, reads Ellen's essay, A Flower Delivery That Brought More Pain Than Pleasure.
With the best of intentions, I once did something regrettable. I sent my younger sisters flowers. The three of us have always been close. When we reunite at home, the images are everywhere. The matching ballet tutus dancing across the wall, our childhood selves captured on grainy slides that our parents project onto a tacked-up sheet in the living room. On point at the annual recital, arms raised, I graze my sister's shoulders with my fingers, conjoining us. We touch in nearly every picture. In a flash of light, we are repositioned as Catholic schoolgirls strolling hand in hand down the street. Another flash, and we're younger still, the two of them riding me like a pack mule, chubby hands knotted in the mane of my hair, my red curls clashing with their straight brown locks. Our hair was our primary distinguishing characteristic until I married young and spent my entire early adulthood with a man, whereas my sisters matured into middle age, unattached, but eager for romance. I sent my sisters flowers to their workplaces. My luckiest colleagues often received bouquets on birthdays and holidays, and I would flush with envy as passers-by stopped to inhale the scent of their good fortune. I never got flowers. Too expensive, my husband would complain. Settled for almost a decade into a not quite happy enough relationship, I mourned the loss of allure that had wilted over time. "Come sit with me," I'd say from my perch on the sofa. But he'd smile and say he preferred his recliner on the other side of the room. I craved touch. I craved attachment. I interloped in my sisters' lives because there was no interloping going on in mine. I sent the flowers with this unsigned note. "You make me crazy." For us, such anonymity wasn't without precedent. When we all lived under one roof, we sometimes tossed each family member's name into a dented metal mixing bowl and then drew the name of our secret pal for the month, someone for whom we'd secretly make gifts or hide special notes. I sent my sisters flowers because I missed living a life where love visited me in such novel ways. I missed corny love notes and proof that I mattered. I missed surprise. With narcissistic naivete, I imagined my sisters' lives were packed with a passion mine lacked, and I fantasized about how it might feel for each to think she had a secret admirer, a butterflies in the belly flutter that had long since faded for me. I sent my sisters flowers without considering that my gift might cause more pain than pleasure. The flowers went out midday, and I waited by the phone, knowing my sisters would call each other, discover they both got the same arrangement with the same note, and realize the flowers came not from a stranger, but from someone who loved them equally. Yes, it was me, I would say when they called. And I had had the fun of sharing in their surprise. Although the flowers did not come from lovers, who could complain when they had come with love? But one sister awoke that morning with a cough and stayed home, unaware of the flowers at her workplace. By the time I realized the mishap and called to confess, the other sister had already brainstormed potential admirers with her colleagues, called the flower shop in a fruitless effort to uncover the identity of the sender, and contacted my mother, who, knowing that a lock on my sister's door had been broken recently, decided the flowers must have been sent by a stalker. No one but I connected the gift with the revival of an old family custom. My first reaction was to laugh. But that's only because I didn't realize there are times it can be less painful to think someone wants to hurt you than to think someone fails to notice you at all. My marriage hadn't yet reached the point where my husband washed his dishes by holding them suspended above mine, scrubbing only those he used, ignoring mine, ignoring me. I wasn't yet shushing my toddler and newborn all morning, brainstorming quiet pastimes so their father could sleep late as he was accustomed, undisturbed by our presence. But invisibility has a shelf life. In our last years together, I was forever in his face, nitpicking, shaming myself with my efforts to engage him in a battle. His anger scared me, but I roused it anyway because negative attention was better than none. Stalker? I asked my sister, amused by how swiftly my gesture had gone wrong and confused by the rage she directed at me. I took offense to her insistence that I had singled her out for mockery because I hadn't any clue what it felt like to be alone, to watch the world paired off somewhere beyond your reach, to want to be enough for yourself, by yourself, while also struggling with the lonely reality of an empty chair across the table, the holiday dinner for one, the vacant space in the bed where the silence damns you with this: you may be good enough for yourself, but you're still not good enough for anyone else. My sister and I fought viciously over the flowers. She called me cruel and accused me of making a fool of her in front of everyone she knows. They're just flowers, I insisted. Why can't you accept that? However poor my judgment, I meant to do something to make you happy. They're not just flowers, she countered, insisting they were the symbol of my cluelessness about her situation. Receivers smashed down upon their cradles, and the line between us remained disconnected for a long time. It was not beyond repair, but still it was strange. We were the sisters who, as children, had our own secret words with which we communicated. How could we now have no common ground or language? It wasn't an estrangement, but an uncommon pause. And step by step, we worked hard to reestablish the connection. Dainty conversations, full of forethought, alert for miscues. Short visits with planned agendas and whispered requests to our other relatives. Whatever happens, don't mention Flowergate. Fortunately, with time, life's natural ebbs created more empathy. My sister fell in love and learned partnership is no picnic. I divorced and felt the raw ache of vulnerability. In that process, she once again became my rock. And when I needed her most, she came rushing fully back to my side, as I did for her. I stood beside her on her wedding day. Out in the pews, every extended family member clutched a flower plucked from his or her own garden that morning as a symbol of love and support for the couple. I was asked to gather the blooms into my sister's bridal bouquet, all in the time it would take the soloist to perform a single song. Blossoms in hand, I dashed into the wings, so consumed by the challenge that I hadn't noticed until I pricked my finger that the lower half of one rose stem bristled with dozens of razor-sharp thorns. I couldn't just leave it out. It represented someone's love. Instead, I tried to snap the stem in half, desperate to separate what was beautiful from what was not, but the shoot only flexed and frayed. pushed by the concluding refrain of the song, I did the only thing I could. I turned my back and bit into the stem, severing it with my teeth and spitting the thorny end onto the ground. It pierced my lip, but I licked the blood away and strode toward the altar with my sister's bouquet. Only then did I realize it. This was the first time I was giving her flowers since the ones that had torn us apart. She smiled as I walked toward her, tearful with happiness. It made me remember her tears on that long ago day and her questions. Why did you send the flowers anonymously and with a teaser? Why couldn't you have just sent the flowers with a note saying, "I love you," signed by you? I could have, of course. I should have. But where once I made a mistake, I was now able to make things right. I put my signature on this day. I took my place at her side and passed the bouquet into her hand. And she then extended that same hand to her husband in hope and joy and anticipation. Who can say what will come of their union? I wish for them the happily ever after, but I also know from experience how love can wither. I couldn't intervene to give my sister something I wasn't able to create for myself, but I did all I could for her on her wedding day. I bled while removing the barbs in an effort to ensure her an unblemished beginning. These flowers wouldn't hurt her. I had taken the thorns.
June Diane Raphael reading Ellen Urbani's essay, A Flower Delivery That Brought More Pain Than Pleasure. We'll hear how Ellen and her sister are doing today after the break. We're back. It's Modern Love, the podcast. I'm Meghna Chakrabarti. Ellen Urbani's essay was published in 2015, but she says the so-called Flowergate incident actually happened more than a decade earlier. She calls writing the essay a personal exercise in atonement.
I'm sort of addicted to honesty, and I'm perfectly willing to be honest about myself and about my own faults and my own mistakes. And I guess I felt like I needed to figure out what my role in that was, what I had done wrong, how I could not hurt somebody that way again. And writing for me was a way to give form to the variety of thoughts and feelings I had about that situation.
Those feelings became clearer to Ellen after her divorce from her first husband.
It took me being on my own, it took me being alone to understand what that must have felt like to send those flowers that day to someone who at that moment in her life was alone. I think sometimes we can't understand that sort of responsibility, loneliness, independence until we've kind of put our own teeth into it.
Ellen didn't tell her sister about the piece until after finding out that the New York Times wanted to publish it.
She was initially hurt and upset, thinking that I was taking something that had been very personal and sort of airing our dirty laundry for people. I think when she saw it, though, and it was me taking accountability for my role and what I'd done wrong in that, it was a little easier for her to talk with me and talk through that. And I did tell her that I would not publish it unless she was in agreement with me that it was an okay thing to do. And so I sent it to her. We edited it together until we had a version that we were both comfortable with.
Ellen is remarried now. She and her husband live on a farm outside Portland, Oregon with her 2 children. Her sister is still happily married too, and their families remain close. Further reassurance of Ellen's reconciliation with her sister came in the form of a delivery on the Sunday morning that her Modern Love essay appeared in print.
There were two bouquets of flowers that we laugh and say sort of passed each other. Mine came to me in Portland, and my sisters went to her in San Francisco. We had each sent each other flowers without telling each other, and they arrived at our homes within minutes of each other with notes that said, "I love you." It's, I think, a beautiful example of how sort of something that can start as somewhat hurtful between family members can turn out to be pretty beautiful.
Ellen Urbani. She's the author of the novel Landfall and the memoir When I Was Elena. She's currently working on another novel. Coming up, Diane Raphael on why she chose Ellen's essay. Diane Raphael told us why she chose to read this week's essay. Namely, she's got two sisters of her own, just like Ellen Urbani.
We've all been at various points in our lives, and I really connected to the idea of wanting to continue to touch them and to always be conjoined as we all navigate from different positions. It really spoke to me.
Thanks to June for reading this week's essay. You can see her in seasons 1 through 3 of Grace and Frankie on Netflix. She's also working on a book called The Badass Woman's Guide to Running for Office and Changing the World. It'll be out in 2019. Daniel Jones, editor of Modern Love for The New York Times, calls Ellen's essay a classic grass is always greener tale.
Where the sister is single and, envying the married life. And Ellen is in this, what's become a loveless marriage, and is sort of envying her sister's freedom and sense of possibility. We always want that thing that the other person has, and that leads to this perfect storm situation of misunderstanding. It's almost Shakespearean in how there's this unraveling of this plan that began with good intentions.
Next week on Modern Love, a different take on wanting what another person has. Betty Gilpin, star of the Netflix series Glow, reads a story of a woman's glimpse into the life she rejected.
Not long after we broke up, he met a girl at a music festival, and a couple of years later, she gave birth to their child. I couldn't stop thinking about the baby that wasn't, a loss somehow made more painful by his baby that was. I spent my workdays browsing photos of his little girl, believing in some twisted respect that I was glimpsing the face of the child I could have had.
Modern Love is a production of The New York Times and WBUR, Boston's NPR station. It's produced, directed, and edited by Jessica Alpert, John Parati, and Amory Sievertson. Our interns are Cameron Chertavian and Megan Mooney. The idea for the Modern Love podcast was conceived by Lisa Tobin. Iris Adler is our executive producer. Daniel Jones is the editor of Modern Love for The New York Times and advisor to the show. Music for the podcast, courtesy of APM. I'm Meghna Chakrabarty. See you next week.